There are some mind-blowing, wahnsinnig, life-altering, unglaublich und earth-shattering differences between the United States and Germany. But there are also just some pretty subtle ones you probably haven't noticed.
Hey guys, and welcome back to our channel. I am Donnie.
And I'm Aubrey.
And we are two Americans currently living in Germany and sharing all of our experiences living and traveling throughout Europe. One thing we particularly enjoy about living in Germany is discovering all of the tiny, minute differences between our two countries. Of course, there are differences that are blatantly obvious when either Germans travel to the US or Americans travel to Germany, like the US Karens and the German almonds, but sometimes the most fascinating differences are those you don't know until you dig deeper and interact with the culture for an extended period of time. Most of the time, these differences are extremely inconsequential and don't necessarily have a right or a wrong, but show an interesting difference in perspective or mentality between these two cultures. And those are exactly the differences that we are going to talk about today in our video. 6 things Germans and Americans do a little bit different.
Disclaimer, as we jump into these differences, remember these are based on our observations or on what a majority of the people do in these countries. You may have a completely different experience based on what region of these countries you have been to, because there are also major differences between parts of the same country. For some context, we are from Oklahoma in the US, a small state in the South that is Texas's hat, and we now live in Rhineland-Pfalz. Yes, for you Americans, Germany has states, and ours is in the southwest corner of Germany.
One thing that connects us all, no matter what country we live in, when we look up at the night sky, we see how small we truly are in this vast universe. We see the stars, the planets, the moon, and constellations. But when you look up at the stars, what is one of the first groupings you notice? The Great Wagon. Well, at least that is what you would most likely call this group of stars if you are German, whereas in the US, this is known as the Big Dipper. The Great Wagon, or the Big Dipper, we just learned isn't actually a constellation, but is an asterism that is part of a constellation, Ursa Major. Ursa Major is the constellation making a giant bear in the night sky, and in English and German both, it can be referred to as something like the Great Bear or the Big Bear. But what we don't agree on is if this tiny portion looks like a wagon or a dipper.
In one of our latest videos, we talked about false friends between German and English, and one we specifically talked about and can be a shock to Americans in a restaurant is what a pepperoni pizza is in Germany. And if you haven't seen that video already, definitely go check that out. But another shock for Americans could be if they go to a coffee shop and order an iced coffee. In the US, this is an iced coffee. But in Germany, an American would order an Eiskaffee, which they would probably think translates to iced coffee. But what they will get looks much more like what an American would refer to as a float. I made this mistake once when ordering what I thought was a cold iced coffee with the dessert that I also ordered. I of course ended up with 2 desserts, which really isn't that bad of a thing.
Here is the breakdown. If an American who doesn't speak German simply puts EIS in a translator, they would get ice and not realize that it is also used to refer to ice cream. Americans also are used to ordering an iced coffee in the US because it is a very common drink. This literally is just coffee that contains ice and is consumed cold. But without the understanding of the other use of ice, they would order it, and in Germany they would get coffee with scoops of ice cream in it.
In the US, a common fun dessert to have is a float, with the most popular and famous one being a root beer float. Basically all it is root beer, can be substituted out for any soda, and then add a couple of scoops of vanilla ice cream. Let us know if you're German and you have had one of these before, because root beer seems to be extremely hard to come by. And I don't know if I have personally seen it in a store here, but I've heard from time to time some people have gotten lucky and found some at high-end grocery stores or import stores. But what still isn't clear to us is, how do you even actually order an iced coffee in Germany? We have heard to say geeisten Kaffee or Kaffee mit Eiswürfel. Let us know what you would say to try to get an American iced coffee.
Sticking with the drink theme, If you go to a dinner party at an American's home and they serve you wine or champagne, you can immediately tell when someone is pretentious or uppity because they will pick up their glass by the stem rather than by the bowl. Or maybe they are just German. That is because most Americans' first reaction when picking up wine or champagne glasses are to grab the bowl and to take a drink. Sometimes if someone picks it up by the stem, someone might make a subtle joke about how, oh, they're so classy and look at you, just because you picked it up by the stem rather than the bowl. But I think that a lot of Americans would also probably say that this is the proper way of doing it, but it just kind of feels like you don't have much control of the glass that way.
However, in Germany, almost everybody grabs the stem of the glass, not because they are pretentious or snobby, but because of various reasons we have heard, like the hand warms up the wine, or they don't want to smudge the glass with their fingertips, etc. Now, I really don't care how someone drinks from these types of glasses because it is your consumption and enjoyment, and that is not for me to judge, but we did do some research into this and found that 1, glass is not a good conductor of heat, and that room temperature has more of an effect than your hand ever does on your drink, and 2, smudges on a glass from fingerprints aren't going to affect the drinking unless you just truly have disgusting dirty fingers that makes the wine glass repulsive to look at. But the actual reason why it is marginally better to hold by the stem is because 90% of taste comes from smell, and the farther away your hand is from your nose when drinking, the less likely you are to smell your hand and alter the flavor of your drinking. For example, if you are wearing perfume, used a strong scented hand soap, etc. At the end of the day, it really shouldn't matter. Just enjoy your own drink and don't get so hung up on if others are hindering their enjoyment by improper hand positioning.
Now, I am pretty sure that most of you may not be aware of this next difference because this is just a very niche group of people aware of these types of things. And that is that Dado stacks are illegal in Germany, but not in the US. Now, most of you are clearly asking yourself, what the heck is a Dado stack? Well, like I said, this is a very niche difference, but I find it fascinating because I love to do woodworking and I use Dado stacks all the time in the US. When you are woodworking and want to make a slot for another piece of wood to slip into it, for example, for a shelf, you can make this on a table saw. A table saw normally has one blade spinning, but in the US, you can stack a lot of specialty blades to make a wide groove in one pass. But in Europe, this is illegal and you can only have one blade on at a time. This requires you to make a pass, then scoot it over a bit, make another pass, scoot it over a hair, make another pass and another, and then you are finally finished. Because this is so niche, I won't go into the rationale of it too much, although I find it fascinating, but I find it interesting with the world famous German efficiency. This efficient way of woodworking is made extremely inefficient for silly safety concerns. Now, there of course are ways that other tools can do this, but we're just going to ignore those for the sake of this difference.
When in the grocery store, there's one funny minor difference when you buy eggs in Germany. You will get 2 less than if you buy a carton of eggs in the US. That is because it is most common in our grocery stores in Germany to buy cartons of 10 eggs versus in the US where most people buy them in cartons of 12 eggs. Now, this isn't saying you can only buy them in these sizes. In fact, both countries have larger and smaller numbers of eggs in a carton, but these are kind of your average normal egg cartons. If you're looking for a reason for this, I have seen some people saying it is because the US uses the imperial system and a dozen eggs just feels right because there are 12 inches in a ruler, or because of other ways 12 shows up, like the 12 months of the year, the 12 disciples of Jesus, etc. And in Germany, they use the metric system, so 10 fits right in with that decimal system. But I'm not really looking to explain this behavior, just pointing it out. I also will point out that we did just buy this hyperbolized XXL carton of eggs that is just the normal dozen eggs, like in the US cartons.
Before we get into this last random, simple, trivial, and interesting difference, we want to ask our international followers a question about that XXL. A few days ago, we were shopping for some clothes and it suddenly hit us that the sizes of shirts in Germany and the US, like most of the world, use the same sizing system for a lot of clothing, even though sometimes those sizes don't match up. But I had a moment where I was talking to a store clerk in German and she asked me what size I needed, and it suddenly hit me. I don't know how to say the size because I knew the tags in Germany say L like in the US, but in the US I would say a large. But I had this moment where I didn't know if I should say large because there's an L on the shirt, and I figured it is based on the English system, or if I should say groß like the German word for large. So I said, I'm not sure, and she called over for a colleague and they said that I probably wear an L, and she told her colleague to go grab an L. So the question is for our German viewers or in other countries that also use a similar system, do you say the English words extra small, small, medium, large, extra large, and so on? Or do you just say the letter as the size and the letter doesn't really correspond to a word you would say? Also, while you are scrolling down to type, you will swing by the subscribe and like button on your way down at the comments, and we would ask that if you enjoy our videos to please hit those free buttons real quick because it would help us out a ton, and we would love to be able to know if you enjoy these topics and styles of videos. That way we can continue to make the content you enjoy seeing.
Now for our last random and trivial difference. If you live in Germany for long enough, you will inevitably hear interesting idioms in everyday language. There are a ton that exist in German that don't directly translate to English and vice versa, but there are also a ton that are directly translatable and used in both languages and mean the same things. However, there's also a third category of idioms that are so close to being the same, but for some reason we just barely changed the phrase, like comparing apples with pears. Well, that is the German translation of the idiom Äpfel mit Birnen vergleichen. And English speakers know what is being relayed with the translation, but are thrown off because in the US, we would say comparing apples to oranges. In both languages, this means the same thing, comparing two things that cannot be compared, like football and soccer. But for whatever reason, Germans chose pears to compare to apples, and we chose oranges to compare to apples.
I want to give a 10-second plug, so don't worry about even skipping this, but we have partnered with the VPN service that we have used for 2 years, ExpressVPN, and they are how we survived lockdown because we can unlock every country's Netflix to watch any shows we want, because if you don't know, Netflix puts some movies and shows in some countries, but not all. And for sure, some countries have better Netflix options than others. They also protect our personal privacy online, but let's be real, Netflix is one of the biggest reasons that we use their services and can catch up on all of our American shows that German Netflix just doesn't have. But you can get 3 months free and find out how in the description below. It is an affiliate link, so if you sign up, we do get a small kickback, but trust us when we say a very small kickback, but we love it and we want you to know about it and help you get some for free. Kostenlos, baby. Now let us know in the comments if you were aware of these differences or not, and what other random and trivial day-to-day differences between Germany and the US you are aware of. Thanks so much for watching this video, and don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, and also hit that bell icon so you can get notifications every time we have a new video, because we would love to continue sharing our experiences with you guys.
Choose.
Take 2. Take 3.
Kaffee.
Kaffee.
Kaffee. Kaffee. Okay. Eiskaffee.
Eiswürfel.
Take 5.
Here is the breakdown. Here is the breakdown.
Clap, take 7.
Also used to refer to ice cream.
That is actually just like a normal size of a dozen eggs in the US.
But I had a moment where I was talking to a cloak. I was talking to a cloak while I was shopping. What I want to buy you. And we would love to be able to show you if you and not. Why do I keep stumbling so much on this one? Oh, so close to the end. I'm more buying apples than oranges. I put apples and oranges in my hand.
Do you want me to hold pears right here?